Number 326-33, facilitated by the Committee on Guam, U.S. Military Relocation, Public Safety, and Judiciary, is hereby convened. On the agenda is, like was mentioned a little earlier, Bill number 326-33, as substituted by the committee, an act to add a new subsection 11301.1, repeal subsection C of subsection 11306, repeal subsection 11306.1, all of Article 3, Chapter 11, Title 7, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the civil statute of limitations in cases involving child sex abuse. Once again, this is the as substituted by the committee. For the information of the public, and I want to extend as chair appreciation to our media partners for disseminating this information in consistent and in compliance with the open government law. The initial notification with regards to this public hearing on the substituted version of the legislation was distributed on July 20th, with the second notice also sent out to the community and to our stakeholders on the 26th of July. The committee has thus far, and I do know that there may be individuals in the room who would be reading their testimony, but thus far, prior to this date, or this hearing, has received written testimony from the Judiciary of Guam, from Mr. Joe R. San Augustine, from Ms. Mary Lou Garcia Pereda, and from Mr. Gerald A. Taitano. And I know that we also have received written testimonies this morning from other individuals. As we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, we will entertain individuals as they arrived in the hearing. And I would like to, before recognizing individuals for the panel, I'd like to thank my colleagues for joining us this morning. Mr. Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz, thank you, Mr. Vice. The chair or the sponsor of the legislation, Senator Frank Blas Jr., Senator Jimmy S. Paudon to my immediate right, and to Senator Blas's left is Senator Tommy Morrison. Thank you very much, Senators, for joining us this morning in this public hearing. I would like to invite the following individuals, please. If by any chance you signed in either to signify support or your position on this proposed legislation and you would prefer not to provide oral testimony, then just signify, just show the chair, signify that you have signed in, but you do not wish to provide oral testimony, because many times the committee has always recommended that any individual who show up at these hearings, really, if you're here in support or in opposition to any proposed legislation, signing in would allow the senators to acknowledge the public's participation. So I encourage you to please, if by any chance you haven't signed in, sign in. You do not have to provide oral testimony. I would like to invite the following individuals. As they come up, I will allow the sponsor of the legislation to highlight the substituted version of this particular proposal, and I'd like to also thank the sponsor of the legislation, Senator Blas, for working with the committee in formulating the substituted version of this proposal. So as I invite them up, I will give the floor to Senator Blas, but I'd like to invite the following individuals, please, to join us up front if you would like to provide written oral testimony. Mr. Tim Rohr, Ms. Mary Lou Garcia Pereda, Joe Santos, Jimmy Castro, Rosa Santos, Poor Terrain. Please excuse me if by any chance okay. Annie Santos and Patricia Saho. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Saho. Annie Santos. I'd like to also invite, we have two more seats to occupy, so if I can invite May Ada. Thank you. Michael or Norma Kirigua. Okay. Francisco Kirigua. Jesus Masi. Josephine Redmond. Jesus Masi. Marie Kirigua. We're trying to occupy the additional 2 seats. So Marie Kiragua, Andrew Camacho, and Victoria Blas Tovis. Fred Leon Guerrero, Rita Crispin, Gerald Titano. Okay, so we have the seats occupied in that order. Please, if I can invite you to provide your testimony in a couple of minutes. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Afade and Manana Sizus. First off, I want to begin by thanking the committee chairman for being able to hold this second public hearing to discuss this bill, and that I've worked closely with him and with the committee in bring us to where we're at today. We're now one step closer to ensuring that victims of child sex abuse are given every opportunity to seek justice against those who have harmed them. As most of you know, the bill completely removes the statute of limitations in cases involving sexual abuse against children. In light of the growing awareness of the issues of child sex abuse, many states have begun to reform both their criminal and civil statutes to give victims increased access to the legal system. We are hoping to do the same here on Guam, as many of the victims of child sexual abuse have not been able to proceed with civil claims against the perpetrators because those claims have been barred by the time limit. We know that time restrictions have been a particularly pressing problem in light of the delicate nature of child sex crimes. Victims often need many years to overcome the pain of their abuse and time to obtain the courage needed to speak out about the abuse they have suffered. As the national trend moves toward loosening past restrictions and statutes of limitations, we are doing the same here with Bill 326. Meanwhile, this substituted version also includes language that holds responsible anyone who enables the abusers, as well as any institutions acting in concert with them. I want to thank all of you that are here today, and to the many of this, because I see many of the same faces that I've seen in the first hearing. To all of you, I say thank you. Thank you for your dedication to our faith, our church, our community, and especially to your dedication and support of the victims. And to the victims, many of whom I know very personally, your courage to come forward has been an inspiration to me and as well as to many others. I will continue to keep all of you in my prayers. And I want to thank you all again for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. We're opening up your comments on substitute bill number 326 S33. Mr. Rohr, please, if you can identify yourself for the record and proceed.
My name is Timothy Rohr. I'm a resident of Agate. I am here to testify in favor of the bill as substituted by the committee. Senators, there was no better illustration of why we need the current legislation than what we witnessed yesterday at the press conference called for by Archbishop Han Tai-Fai, the Apostolic Administrator for the Archdiocese of Aguon. Despite being sent to Guam by the Pope himself with direct instructions to take, quote, urgent measures relative to the fiasco wrought by the horrific accounts of Archbishop Anthony Sablon Aparon's rape and molestation of young boys in the 1970s, and Aparon's even more horrific response to those accounts, Archbishop Han, upon officially taking charge of the diocese with an address to the Catholic Church of Guam at St. Anthony Parish on June 9th, said not a word about any of this. Later, when pressed to respond after a third and fourth alleged Aparon victim came forward, Han made a public statement about how he was praying for both Aparon and the victims, quote, without prejudice. On June 12th, Walter Denton, who accused Apron of raping him when he was a 12-year-old altar boy in Agate, stood on the steps of the cathedral mere feet away from Archbishop Hahn. A PDN news camera captured Walter asking Father Ted Nowak, who was standing next to Hahn, to speak with him. Hahn was addressing the demonstrators in front of the cathedral. Nowak told Denton, no, he has to say Mass. Then Nowak and Hahn turned their backs on Denton and disappeared into the cathedral. Denton and his wife decided to attend the Mass celebrated by Hahn. However, according to Denton, before Mass began, Hahn addressed the congregation noting that there were protesters in front of the cathedral, but that they would be gone in, quote, 2 weeks. Denton and his wife walked out of the church. On July 1st, Robert Klitsky and Greg Perez, representing the Concerned Catholics of Guam, met with Archbishop Hahn and shared with him a lengthy list of issues, including and especially mentioning his lack of attention to Apron's alleged victims. According to Mr. Klitsky, Hahn's only response was to, quote, quibble with the word victims and then to say goodbye. For decades now, the Catholic Church has shown itself generally unwilling to police itself in the matter of the molestation of minors by Catholic clergy, unless it is suddenly faced with legal and fiscal consequences. This is what happened on Monday, July 25th, when Archbishop Hahn was served the summons to defend against the complaint filed by attorney David Lujan in behalf of his clients, the alleged victims whom Apron subsequently and publicly libeled, slandered, and maligned. It is no coincidence that Hahn called a press conference 2 days later to say that he was now going to reach out to the victims and that he was taking the allegations seriously. Given the international press Guam had during the initial phase of the allegations against Apron, practically the whole world knew that this was why Hahn was sent here. Yet it took a lawsuit in nearly 2 months for him to get around to saying so. Sadly, the abomination of child abuse has thrived in the bowels of the Catholic Church because of a culture of mutual clerical secrecy and a false hagiography attributed to the clergy by many well-intentioned laity. But most of all, as we are now seeing in the media with greater frequency, the, quote, filth in the church, as Pope Benedict once termed it, can be laid at the feet of the episcopal arrogance we suffered first from Apron and now from Hahn. Nothing, I repeat, nothing seems to move these monarchs of the church to responsible action other than the very long arm of the law. And sadly, while it should be God's law which moves them, it is not. It is laws like the one before us today. Senators, whether you know it or not, the whole world is watching. Go to the flag counter on junglewatch.info and see the number of countries which are turning into the drama being carried out daily in Guam. Watch the real-time counter and see the logins clicking through every few seconds from every corner of the globe. Check the page view counter and see it tick up by at least 10,000 page views per day. In the flag view counter, check to see how often the Vatican City logs in. Why are they watching? Archbishop Apron is a member of a very powerful and well-financed international organization which has wrought similar heartache and destruction in dioceses around the world. Even now it is caring for him and hiding him as it has other disgraced clerics, most recently our own Father Luis Camacho, who was secretly shuttled off to a diocese in the Middle East after his arrest in Guam last year. The fact that it is a bishop who stands accused of these horrors and that a major figure of the Roman Curia has been assigned to Guam in his stead has heightened world attention of what is happening right here, right now, and in this room. There is a chance that should this law pass and be enacted into law, that Archbishop Anthony Sablon Apron, one of the few bishops in the world who is a member of this organization and who is a major player in its mad scheme, will be brought to justice. And the Vatican will finally see that this hiding and moving and secreting about of those who abuse and ravage and rape our children will not only not be tolerated, but will be pursued and prosecuted and punished by every possible legal means. Senators, the world is watching and waiting to see if you are ready and willing to stop these monsters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roy, for your testimony this morning. If we can ensure that the committee receives a copy of your written testimony. Sorry. Ms. Garcia, Florida.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Senators. My name is Mary Lou Garcia Pareda, and I'm currently a resident of Tamuning. As Senator Blas noted, I came before this committee last month to state my support for the original Bill 326-33, and I'm here again today because I'm in favor of Bill 326-33 as substituted by the Committee on Guam U.S. Military Relocation, Public Safety, and Judiciary. And as noted, I submitted my testimony via email, but I am here this morning to read it into the record. As noted on June 27th during the testimonies of the original bill, quote, "Justice should have no expiration date." Yet, 3 of the known survivors of child sexual abuse at the hands of a Catholic priest, Anthony Sablan Aparon, who was eventually elevated to the rank of Archbishop of Aguon, are still waiting for justice, but it cannot come for them in the criminal prosecution of their abuser. It took 40 years for the survivors to come forward, and when they did, all they wanted was for the man who assaulted them to acknowledge his actions and apologize to them. Instead, they were met with insults and threats from Aparon and others in his circle. The survivors were accused of being malicious and calumnious liars, and they were threatened with a defamation lawsuit. And even after Aparon was replaced by an apostolic administrator in the person of Archbishop Savio Hontai Phi, who was directed to ensure that, per Pope Francis, priority must not be given to any other kind of concern than those of child sexual abuse survivors, the administrator ignored them. He did absolutely nothing for the survivors. That is, like Mr. Roram indicated, until yesterday, July 27th, when the Apostolic Administrator held a press conference in which he recanted and retracted the insults and threats made against the survivors. Although the Apostolic Administrator now claims that he takes reports of sexual misconduct by officials of the Church very seriously, he is no more than a placeholder pending the return of Aparon or the nomination of a new bishop. Once this Apostolic Administrator returns to Rome, his new and improved procedure for handling future reports of sexual misconduct will most likely fall by the wayside. Now, as a cradle Catholic, it grieves me to admit that the Universal Church has consistently failed in handling reports of sexual abuse over the decades. We are learning that the Catholic Church at the local level and even at the Vatican is more concerned about protecting the clergy by covering up the wrongdoing than about protecting the innocent children and ensuring a safe environment for them. So this is what makes this substitute Bill 326 so important. Not only does the bill remove the statute of limitations, it also allows victims of child sexual abuse to commence actions not just against their abusers, but also against their enablers, their aiders or abettors, those acting in concert with them, and their institutions or corporation sole at any time. The editorial in today's edition of the Guam Post recognized, "It is unfortunate that the Church cannot be relied on to provide justice for abuse victims. It has a history of transferring clergy accused of a crime, particularly child sexual abuse, and to shield them from the consequences of their behavior. This bill will do what the church hierarchy has failed to do for decades: help put an end to child sexual abuse. As I stated in my previous testimony, I believe this is a bill that should be co-sponsored so that it can be a bipartisan bill to help victims of child sexual abuse. This is a bill that should be unanimously passed." Once again, I ask on behalf of Walter Denton, Roland Sundia, and Roy Quintanilla, and the late Sonny Kanata, and any other victims of child sexual abuse from decades past, please pass Bill 326-33 as substituted and open the door for these victims to pursue a civil lawsuit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Garcia Pareda, and for providing the committee with a copy. Mr. Santos.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished senators, my name is Joseph A. Santos. I'm the founder of the Silent No More group. You might have seen my truck with a sign that says "Silent No More, Stop Child Sex Abuse." I fully support Bill number 326-33, the substitute bill which is before us, on behalf of all the children, and it's not just limited to the issues that have been brought before us, but to all the children of Guam. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to try to switch to Chamorro. But my Chamorro teacher was Mr. Bob Klitsky. So if I get stuck, you can blame my teacher. Paramza todo ni senador Jesus Masi nesti tetsumizu pagu nalai ni gaigigi menota. Mr. Vice Speaker, Chairman, Senator Frank Bloss Jr. Ginentori Famagun ni mamolesta nesti man malongo na tautagui. Jesus Masi importantis din nalai. Atana todo i Ciudad, Philadelphia, Boston, Los Angeles. Bula dino lagat ti sine mana fanadan todo tetsunya sesta mokpu iti mafananan statute of limitations. Esti pago tatotsagi gini giza Guam i tetsu mizu gifino Mr. Roar ma atanam da todo i tano siya. Megai na chetnut hamzu sinya fumamalik stina tutsu. Esta pa befais no tipa nokko sa guanabay na appling gifino tomorrow guanabay na godon stilao lo comprendi put favor nin nisita todo hamzu sangoni ham ni tauto haditu musa putis na nalai so dingin ti masapotis ti nalai pes ma pray besti ma fananan child sexual abuse. Jesus Masi.
Jesus Masi. Mr. Santos. Say now.
To the distinguished senators, thank you for this opportunity to address you and provide my testimony this morning. My name is Rosa Cruz Santos, a resident of Jonia and a parishioner of Nuestra Señora de los Aguas Church in Monglong. I am a member of the Island Board Confraternity of Christian Mothers. I come to you today as a mother, grandmother, and a catechist of the Catholic Church. The law which you are crafting and hopefully passing in a few weeks is sorely needed in our island of Guam. As a mother and a catechist, I speak and discuss the Ten Commandments. I speak and discuss making an examination of conscience to my children and children in CCD classes. I tell them of the importance to admit, to confess the wrongdoings, the hurts in what they have done, and admit the good they failed to do. In admitting and confessing these sins, these are healing. There comes healing, forgiveness, and the soul is set from the bondage of sin. I take it that Catholics who are here know what I am talking about. These things happened in the sacrament of confession, where we receive God's grace because we will to right the wrong that has been done. Our church teaches us to be humble and confess our wrongdoings. Archbishop Hebda of the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, in a statement to the media, admitted then of wrongdoings in the handling of sex abuse in Ramsey County. I would like to quote him as he spoke of a humbling prayer. Quote, "Traditionally, at the beginning of each Mass, Catholics stand and ask God and their brothers and sisters to forgive what they have done and what they have failed to do. Here in Guam also, there has been much wrongdoings in the handling of child sex abuse in our church. Child sex abuse is wrong, it is evil. When it happens and we do nothing about it, it too is wrong because we fail to stop it. You senators have heard testimonies of victims of child sex abuse. I believe there are many children sexually abused in the past by these bullies. Please do everything you can to pass this bill that we have here now for the past children's sexual abuse cases. Put an end to the wrongdoing in the handling of child sex abuse in our church and on our island, and bring this evil to an end. Thank you for your time. God bless you.
Jesus Ms. Santos, thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and all the senators of the committee. My name is Andrew Camacho, and I'm a resident of Tamuning, and I'm here in support of Bill 326-33. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. These words were written by James Madison in 1788, 228 years ago. They are based on a fundamental principle which gives them meaning and relevance in any time and in any place and in any situation. One situation is what we are currently facing today, the issue of child sexual abuse. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. When speaking about child sexual abuse, we are generally dealing with a person with some authority over another person. This may be a parent or guardian, a teacher, a coach, a priest, a minister, etc. We need laws to deal with people in authority who sexually abuse children and then use time, through the statute of limitations, as a shield to protect them from the consequences of their crime. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. A dependence on the people is, no doubt, the primary control on the government, but experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. In the case of child sexual abuse, auxiliary precautions are absolutely necessary. Standard laws with the statute of limitations literally prevent the victim from obtaining some measure of justice when he or she is finally able to come forward and confront the abuser. To make matters worse, the abuser sometimes hides behind the walls of an institution, such as a church, a corporation, a government agency, etc. We need to make sure that there is no place to hide. There should be no safe place for anyone who abuses our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camacho, for your testimony this morning. Mr. Taitano.
Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, my name is Gerald Taitano, a resident of Chalampauco. I am in complete support of Bill number 326-33 as amended, and respectfully ask each and every member of this legislature for support so that we can protect children, help victims heal, and hold perpetrators and their enablers accountable for their actions. Victims of pre-sexual abuse have brought civil suits against the Catholic Church for several years. Tragically, many victims were only able to collect settlements if they promised to remain silent about their abuse. This condition of confidentiality enabled predator priests to continue to have access to future victims. More importantly, the Church's now public failure to alter the pattern of behavior of its priests indicates that it remains unmotivated to change its practices. I no longer feel that the Church can fix itself in this regard. While a few predatory priests have been criminally prosecuted, there have been little or no personal accountability on the part of bishops who place predatory priests in parishes which have ready access to children, gave false assurances to families of their victims, shuffled pedophile priests from one parish to another to avoid criminal prosecution, and or mislead parishioners to believe that those predatory priests had been removed from pastoral service. Priests and church officials who engage in conduct that enable priests to sexually abuse children should face criminal prosecution. Again, we cannot continue to expect the Church to fix itself in this regard. We must hold child sexual abusers and their enablers accountable for their actions. Serious moral, legal, and ethical questions arise whenever a prosecutor cannot adequately indict child sexual offenders or their enablers. Again, I respectfully ask each and every member of this legislature to support Bill number 326-33 as amended or substituted to protect children, help victims heal, and hold perpetrators and their enablers accountable. Thank you very much.
This is Mr. Taitano for your testimony this morning. Senators, any questions for the panel members? If not, thank you very much for your testimony again. Appreciate your presence today. If I can invite the following individuals to the table, and I will limit this to the individuals that I will name at this point in time. Mr. John Kinata, Roy Quintaniza, Walter Denton, and Roland Sundia. Good morning, gentlemen, and we will begin in that sequence. Please, if I can ask you, thank you for joining us this morning and providing testimony. Mr. Kanata, you have the floor.
My name is John Michael Kanata, also known as Champ. And thank you for providing me this opportunity to talk to you on behalf of my deceased brother, Joseph Kanata, better known as Sonny, myself, my mother, and my family. What I wish to share with you today are my childhood memories of a dark and troubling past which I've spent most of my life trying to forget. I've kept them buried deep in my memory and in my heart, a terrible thing that happened to my brother. I've tried hard to understand why this happened to him, but at the same time over the years, I tried to pretend for his sake that it never happened, but it did. During the year 1978, I was 8 years old. My brother was 9, and as many young boys in Agate, we went to Mass regularly, became altar boys. The village parish priest, Father Apron, was in Agate at the time. You know, while growing up, I was your, regular boy, sometimes typical, sometimes not so typical, just wanting to have fun. I was 8 years old. I was the one that always liked to explore. I was curious. I often got myself in trouble. My brother, my older brother, he was, on the other hand, was different. He was straight. Older brothers are. They respectful, always on time, listen to mom. I was a younger brother. He was always grabbing and, trying to keep in order. We would go fishing. Everything was cherry. We were just normal brothers. I remember one day in church, I was around the chalice where the bread was at and the wine, and I literally, I was a little hungry, grabbed some bread and ended up drinking all the wine. And during the Mass, Father Aguon was kind of shocked because when he opened up the box, there was no more wine or bread. He had to stop Mass, and somebody ran out and got the bread. And after that, he had a meeting, and saying, "Hey, what happened to the bread and wine?" And I thought it would be like a Artful Boy code of silence, but everyone just pointed at me. So ever since that, I was never allowed near the wine or the bread. And I was on, I would say, landscaping duties after Mass. I'm picking up all the cigarette buds and walking around so that was me. And, that was why I was never invited to sleep over. They just wanted me to do my time and go, right? Because, I was the Aguon. One morning, after my brother spent the night at Father Aguon's house, he came home very upset, angry, in pain, crying. I'm 8 years old. I'm scared. I'm mad. I don't know what's going on. And he kept on asking me, "Don't tell, don't repeat, don't tell anyone. Don't tell, because And he said to me, "Father, Aguon touched me." And he said he was hurting badly, and he couldn't use the bathroom. And I didn't understand what he was saying at the time. I'm 8 years old, right? I'm just like, what did he mean by the bathroom or the pain? But, I knew he hurt him. I knew after that, when he came home that morning, he changed, And I kept my promise to my brother for 38 years. I never wanted to repeat it. We tried to tell her mom, but no one would listen. Back in the day, right? Don't bring shame to the family. Don't mess, But no one listened. My brother and I, we shared the same room. It was two of us. And often he would wake up at night and start crying and hitting the bed. And I was trying to, saying, "Hey, we're going to get back. We're going to kill Father. We'll burn the house. We'll do something, But again, I was 8 years old. I remember the lighter fluid and how we would, I would say, "Okay, we're going to go burn the priest's house down." So the plan was, my brother and I would run across the side of the house with the lighter fluid. Then he'll take his mattress, and then the house would blow up. That was my thinking. So what happened? Lighter fluid running around the house, and then my brother with the mattress. Then he got caught. We got caught. Actually, he got caught. I was running around, so they didn't see me. And then Father Aguon was there. Called my mom, took him in the, and when he came home, he said to me, he did it again, Nothing changed after that. He was withdrawn, disillusioned. He kept on begging me, don't tell anyone. He was ashamed, you know. And we tried telling everyone. No one would listen. So, you know, eventually we left Guam. Tried to just forget about it, you know. And we no longer acknowledge that we were Catholic, you know, back in the States. We're saying we're Jewish, we're like, you know, we didn't trust anyone involved in the church. And then my brother, you know, we were teenagers. He got very violent. I mean, very quick-tempered. He would, you know, he always wanted to fight, and you know, it was only him and I. So, you see your brother fighting, of course, you're jumping in. So, you know, we're a year apart. So, and that's what we did. I mean, it changed him. It changed us. And then the drugs and the alcohol started, and that's what killed him. I mean, the consumption of alcohol, the drugs, the fights. I remember out of nowhere, it'll come out, you know. And then for years it'll stop, and then it'll come out again. But it killed him. But he would always say, please don't tell anyone, you know, when we got high and all that, it'll come out, and don't say anything, you know, don't tell your cousins. He was ashamed. And that's what happened. And I promised him, but today I broke that promise. Today, before you senators, the deepest, darkest secrets are revealed now. A promise kept for 38 years is now broken. I mean, I can still remember my brother's face when he came home from Father Aguon's house. I remember that morning when he was sodomized. He was 9 years old, and he was sodomized. I mean, it haunts me. A part of me died when he died. I lost. But I only wish that I could have done something. You know, I blame myself sometimes. What could I have done? But, you know, no one would listen. So we just ran away, but no one would listen. But I love and miss him. But I feel now that he's resting in peace, knowing that I'm speaking for him now. That say he's speaking through me. He spoke through my mom several weeks ago. I had no idea that she was coming. No idea. I had no idea that my brother spoke to my mom about what happened, because we kept it a secret. I didn't know he told my mother before he died that this happened. I mean, I've been estranged with my mom for many years after I just pulled out, just left. But I'm happy that she made peace with Sonny shortly before he died. I'm happy that she came forward, because now we've reconnected. You know, I haven't seen my mom in years, but now we're actually talking now. And finally, people are listening. Finally. I mean, we were raised as boys to trust the church, the higher authority, the priest, God, you know. But it hurt him. It hurt us badly. But I feel that times have changed, and this is our opportunity to bring this matter to truth and truth to light, and APRA needs to step down, admit his crimes on my brother, and we need to stop him and any others from hurting anyone else. Senators, I know my brother was raped by Archbishop Aguon. He was sodomized. He was only 9 years old. I love my brother. I miss him badly. But in looking back, I know my brother protected me. He rescued me from suffering this evil fate. And I ask that you do so now. Pass this bill. Protect the boys and girls. And help keep my brother Sonny, Roy, Rollin, Walter, and others like them. Go after their abusers and the institutions that protect them. And cover for them for their past crimes. And to deter any other future predators to the kids. Because remember, healing cannot begin without justice. Healing cannot begin without justice. Apron and all other abusers need to be held accountable for their actions, for the pain and lifetime suffering of my brother, me and my family, Roy, Rollin, and Walter and their families, and the many other victims and families that yet to come out. Sign Maasi, and thank you for listening. And to my brother Sonny, rest in peace. And now they're listening, bro. Now they're listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Connector, for sharing your testimony. Mr. Quintaniza.
Hafa-day Senators, my name is Roy T. Quintaniza, and I would like to testify that I support and urge the passage of amended bill number 32633. I was not present at the last hearing, and you didn't hear my story, so I'd like to share that with you today. I was sexually abused by a priest. He was my pastor, Father Anthony Aperon, also known as Father Tony at the time, and now known as Archbishop Anthony Aperon. I was 12 years old at the time. I was one of over 100 altar boys at Mount Carmel Parish in Aguon. I really enjoyed being an altar boy at the time for many reasons. It was my way of serving God, my church, my community, and my faith. I made many friends, and it was very rewarding for me personally. It happened one day when Father Tony Aperon took several of us altar boys to watch a movie at the Hafa-day Theater. We all rode in the Mount Carmel van. After the movie, he drove all the other altar boys home. I was the last of the altar boys in the van. I thought he was going to take me home like the others, but instead, when we were alone in the van, he asked if I could sleep at the priest's house so I could help him at the church in the morning. I told Father Tony I would come by in the morning to help him. He said it was better that I sleep at the priest's house so we could go to the church together. I told him I could get up in the morning early, but he said again that it was better that I sleep over. Then he said he would ask my parents. He drove me home and followed behind me as I walked towards the front door of my home. I entered and my parents were in the living room. When they saw Father Tony behind me, my parents stood up and greeted him. He then asked my parents if I could sleep at the priest's house so I could help him at the church in the morning. My parents did not hesitate to say yes. My family was always very respectful and accommodating to our parish priests. My siblings and I were raised to be devoted to our faith. It was our way of life. My mom especially, it seemed to me she was always praying, especially for the safety of her children. That was always the first thing she prayed for. And whenever she had time, she would go to Mass. Otherwise, she prayed in her room, in front of statues, saints, and always with lit candles. My parents didn't ask me if I wanted to sleep at the priest's house. They just told me to do it. It didn't matter whether I wanted to go or not. So I turned right around and went with Father Tony exactly the way I arrived. When we arrived at the priest's house, Father Tony told me to sleep in his room. I know where his room was because other altar boys and I slept over at the priest's house on occasions in the living room, never in Father Tony's room. I told Father Tony I would sleep in the living room, but he said no and insisted I sleep on his bed. I felt so uncomfortable. When we got to his room, he sat me down at the edge of the bed, put his hand on my shoulder, and told me how much he trusted me and could count on me. I felt so uncomfortable being alone in his room with him. Then he said, "Let's go to sleep," and told me to lie on that side of the bed and pointed to the right. I laid on the bed, then he turned the lights off. Moments later, I felt his hand squeezing my private areas, at first through my pants, then gradually in my pants. I was trying my best to push his hand away. It was painful. I used both hands and my legs to try and block him from touching me and squeezing my private parts because it was painful and extremely uncomfortable. My efforts to stop him didn't faze him. I don't know why I didn't just leave. I was very scared, confused, and uncomfortable. He would stop, then try it again several more times. It was so painful I cried. I remember I didn't sleep that night. I was too afraid to move because I thought he would do more things to me. So I just curled up. I cried for a while, and I felt a lot of emotions. I was scared, angry, sad, alone, embarrassed, and humiliated. I didn't know what to do. When I arrived home the next morning, my mom asked me what was wrong. I told her nothing. I know my mom was worried because I wasn't my usual self. I am sure she knew something was wrong, but I never told her. Sometime later, I told Father Jack Nyland what Father Tony did to me. He was the first person I told until many years later. I needed to say something to someone because I was so confused, and I needed to speak to someone. I held on to so much resentment, I felt like I was losing my mind. I thought of dying and whether it would matter to anyone. Joining the Air Force helped me out a lot. It gave me structure and self-confidence, and it taught me to be independent. I was able to care for my mother and brother after joining the Air Force and being stationed on Guam. I learned that I had a reason to live. My Down syndrome brother needed me. Having my brother kept me grounded. I believe God made my brother that way so he could give my life meaning and taking care of him, and in return saving my life. Even after 40 years, I am still very angry, resentful, and disgusted by the sight and thought of Archbishop Aperon. He never apologized to me or shown any remorse for what he did to me. I think he thinks that just because I left Guam over 27 years ago, that all was forgotten. That could not be further from the truth. All those years, I thought I was his only victim, and I asked myself why. I never did anything wrong to him. My entire family and I gave the church and our parish priests everything, our time, our labor, donations to the church, food. I served as an altar boy, and we were loyal servants to our church and faith. My parents put their trust in him that he would not harm me, but instead guide me to do God's will. We all thought that. My mother prayed every day for the safety of her children, and Father Tony took advantage of our devotion and loyalty to the church. He planned all along to deceive my parents by using his position as our pastor with the intent to sexually molest me. Only a monster would do such a thing. I am still very angry and bitter and confused at Archbishop Aperon. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. For my own sake, I pray that God will give me the strength and the courage to do what is right, not just for me, but for all his victims. I worry there might be others like myself that perhaps push this experience in the back of their minds, hoping to never have to deal with it, and in hopes of getting closure for this traumatic experience. I hope someday he will be sorry for what he did to me. I am still trying to forgive him. I hope someday I will have the courage and strength to forgive him. It's been a long time since this traumatic experience, and I feel like it just happened yesterday. I want closure. I need closure. I lost all faith and respect for Archbishop Aperon. I have never wanted to avoid anyone as much as him, but to avoid him is not the answer to begin my healing, because it would mean he got away with what he did to me and other victims. I want and need closure, but before that, I want so badly to have justice, and then I can have closure. I carried the guilt and shame with me for 40 years, until I came forward a couple months ago. It wasn't until I discovered by chance that other altar boys, friends of mine that I grew up with, happened to share their stories of our past and included being sexually abused by the same priest. It was then that we decided to take the risk and confront the person that molested us, and we agreed to accept whatever the consequences would be for coming forward. I came forward because it was the right thing to do, for myself, my friends, and especially because I feared that there might be others that were sexually abused by Father Tony. After I came forward on my May 17 press conference confronting Archbishop Aperon about what he did to me, rather than admit what he did, Archbishop Aperon instead called me a liar and said that I was attempting to divide the church by making false allegations. This is evidence that Archbishop Aperon had no remorse for what he did to me. He hides behind the cloth and the church as if I was trying to divide the church, when instead it took everything I had to confront the person that committed such a deplorable act to me. I made it clear when I came forward that I was confronting the person, Anthony Sablan Aperon, and not the church. Since May 17, 2016, when I submitted my statement to the Chancery, it was only just yesterday that Apostolic Administrator Archbishop Savio Han Taifai, at a press conference, expressed his desire to meet with the victims of Archbishop Aperon and retract all prior statements from members of the Archdiocese that attacked our character and reputation. It took a lawsuit of defamation to force Archbishop Han and the church to respond, a lawsuit that our attorney David Lujan said would not have occurred but for the reckless video statements and press releases made by Archbishop Aperon and the Aguon Archdiocese. Otherwise, we would still be slugging it out in the court of public opinion, waiting and hoping and praying for the church to properly respond. We were lucky, but this is not typical of what happens. Institutions typically remain silent, stall, delay, and use every dilatory tactic in the book to wear down an accuser, forcing him or her to give up or just go away. The bill before us will at least level the playing field somewhat, giving victims like me a chance to confront abusers and to have our day in court. It will not be easy, but we will at least have a fighting chance. No one, especially a child, should ever have to go through being sexually abused or be afraid to come forward and tell someone for fear that no one would believe him or her. Sexual abuse is a traumatic, horrifying experience for any adult, let alone a child. And when a perpetrator threatens a child, if he or she tells anyone, is in itself evil and malicious. Any victim of sexual abuse knows that the experience is life-changing in the worst way. For many victims and myself, thoughts of suicide was often and common. Many victims do commit suicide or escape to drugs, alcohol, crime, and other antisocial behavior. Sexual abuse robs societies, families, friends, communities of their loved ones. Lifting the statutes of limitations on child sexual abuse will encourage and allow victims to come forward in hopes of seeking and receiving justice and closure for their pain and suffering. No child should ever be denied the opportunity to seek justice for a heinous crime based on statutes of limitations. Is it fair that a child abuse victim not be allowed closure and justice for what happened to him or her as a child? Is it fair that a sexual predator, a pedophile, be allowed to get away with molesting children because they are protected by statutes of limitations? Please do the right thing and lift the time limit on when victims of child sexual abuse may pursue and seek justice and closure. Si Diyos Masi.
Mrs. Masi, Mr. Cantineza, for your testimony this morning. Mr. Denton, you're recognized.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Walter Denton. Today is a momentous day for the victims of child sexual abuse, along with our family members and friends who are here to testify, imploring our esteemed senators to pass this amended bill that will lift the statute of limitations, so that abusers such as Archbishop Anthony Sablon-Napoleon can rightfully account for the crimes that they or he has committed. By lifting the statute of limitations, you will allow me and all those who have been raped, molested, and sexually abused to feel confident that justice will be served. I have been struggling and suffering since my childhood to my entire adult life, trying to cope with what happened to me. There isn't a day that I don't think about what Archbishop Aguon had done to me on the evening of April 15, 1977. I have tried to tell someone of what happened to me, who I thought would help me. I was disappointed, I was shocked, and most importantly, I felt defeated at his response. I felt patronized and ignored for too long. Even when I had the opportunity to face my abuser, he did nothing to help me in any way. But instead, he gave me a CD, a picture of himself, and a picture of Mother Mary as a parting gift. However, that did not keep me from getting back up, dust myself off, lift and hold my head up high, and kept trying all over again to simply get through each day. I have made this a lifelong goal that I would someday tell my horrific experience to someone or anyone who would stop and listen to my story of how I was raped by Archbishop of Guam when I was 13 years old. I wanted to expose him and his devilish and heinous acts of abuse against the altar boys of Aguon to the Vatican. Senators, he raped me. I wanted him to admit what he had done to me as well as to the other victims that sits right here before you. I want to face him in a court of law and ask him, why did you do this to me? He needs to face his accusers and answer to the victims of his crimes. He should be stripped of everything that means anything to him. God knows he stripped me of my dreams and took away what meant everything to me, and that was to become a priest. I have struggled with this nightmare for over 38 years. There has not been a single day that went by of how I felt when he pinned me down on his bed and raped me. Since coming out on June 7, 2016, I have not been contacted by anyone from the Archbishop of Guam or from the Archdiocese. No one has even attempted to contact me. Monsignor Bibi Arroyo went on KUAM and stated that they have reached out to the victims to offer help. That is not true. To this very moment, where I sit today, no one has ever reached out to me. Although I now understand from the media yesterday that Archbishop Han now wants to meet us. It makes me shake my head and to wonder why after 7 weeks that he has been there, that he has been here, and he finally said he wants to meet us. Yes, that is a step in the right direction. Remember that after I came forward on June 7, 2016, my wife and I decided that later that week, a Sunday on June 12, 2016, we were going to join the picketers at the cathedral as we made our way to the airport for a noon departure. I was at the steps of the cathedral when Archbishop Han and his assistant came out and stood not more than 10 feet away. I attempted to get his attention with his assistant and even told him I was one of the victims. I just wanted to say hi. I just wanted to be acknowledged. His response was essentially, "Don't call us, we'll call you." My wife and I left disgusted as how I was treated. It was no better than what Archbishop Aguon did to me when I met him in Tacoma. Since then, Ronan came forward, a lawsuit was filed, and the protest grew in scope, volume, and size. That was 7 weeks ago. It's obvious that the only language abusers and the institutions that cover and protect them is a lawsuit. I strongly believe that Archbishop Han would not have acknowledged us yesterday if we had not filed a defamation lawsuit against Archbishop Aguon and the church. This is why this bill is critical for victims such as us and others who are too afraid to come out because of the treatment they will get. This bill will give these victims who are too afraid to come forward something to hang on to and to punish institutions for hiding and protecting the abusers employed by them. It will give us justice and ability to bring closure in our lives. This past Sunday, I had the opportunity to walk with the protesters to show support and to show that we want Archbishop Aguon to simply step down and be defrocked. I will continue to come out here to our beautiful island to stand with the people of Guam demanding a change. In fact, my wife and I already decided to come back soon and retire here. The signs we see out here on the street light bulbs, up and down Marine Drives and through some of the villages, the signs that are painted on the telephone poles, I know you guys have seen that. Some says protect the fish, protect the plants, but there's one thing we should add. It's the one that would say protect the children, protect our kids. Senators, it hurts, to hear stories like this. Okay? And with the passing of this bill, will not only help us, but it will protect the future of our children. So I am asking you guys to please consider and pass this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denton. Mrs. Sandia, you recognize.
Afternoon and good morning, Senators. My name is Roland Paul Sandia of Aguon. I'm here to urge that you pass Bill number 326-33. I am a victim of child sexual abuse. As you know, I came forward and told my story on June 15, 2016, of how I was molested by Father Anthony Apron in 1977. When this happened to me, I was afraid to tell anyone because I didn't think anyone would believe me. I felt betrayed by a man who I trusted and is well respected in the community. I have had to live with this pain and anger for 39 years, keeping my wife, my children in the dark all the time. After coming forward and sharing my story, no one from the Vatican has made any attempts to contact me despite false reports from the Chancery that they have reached out to the victims. As you may have heard from his press conference, Walter stated that he contacted the nuncio as far back as last August and told them that he was raped by Archbishop Apron. That was 12 months ago. It has been over 2.5 months since Roy came out, then Doris, Walter, and then finally me. That was 6 weeks ago. You would think that after such serious and grave allegations, the investigation team from the Vatican will waste no time and expense to start gathering evidence, and the key evidence are the victims, of course, unless they just want this to all go away. I can assure you that we are not going away. The truth will prevail, and we intend to stand by her torch. We need your help to light it up. Yesterday, and only yesterday, after being here 7 weeks, the Apostolic Administrator, Archbishop Hahn, held a news conference where he finally acknowledged the victims, who publicly made allegations that Father Anthony Apron had molested them and was offering to meet them personally wherever they are. Yet, he also stated that it is out of his hands because only Rome can investigate. Now, how convenient is that? The acknowledgement by Archbishop Hahn yesterday should have been the first thing he did upon arriving on island 7 long weeks ago. Instead, it took a lot of pushing, picketing, protesting, and eventually a defamation lawsuit to extract a positive response from him and the church. If this is what it will take just to get this meager response yesterday, imagine the arduous and difficult road ahead of us victims just to have our day in court so that justice can be served. This is why the amendment you made to include institutions is essential, because it will force institutions such as the church to do the right thing by immediately exposing and reporting abusers who work for them to the proper authorities, instead of using their institutional power, might, and wealth to deny justice. We feel like David going up against Goliath and his entire army. This amended bill will give us a slingshot of a chance to achieve justice and to find closure after 39 years. I support the lifting of the statute of limitation on child sex abuse so that victims of sex abuse will know and have a tool to fight back and to find justice. We need it not only for existing victims, but future victims as well. We need to abolish any kind of statute of limitations for sex abuse crimes so that potential perpetrators will know that no amount of time will prevent a victim from coming forward to sue and for the government to prosecute. It is difficult as it is to come forward after being sexually abused, let alone having to fight institutional heavyweights just to get our day in court. We pray and hope that upon the passage and signing of this bill, other victims will come forward so they can begin the long road towards healing and recovery. As I said in my last testimony, we have to repair our past, contain the present, and protect our future. That's our children. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandia, for your testimony. Gentlemen, I understand the courage it requires for you to be able to provide your testimony this morning. So on behalf of the committee, we'd like to thank you very much for your testimony. Any senators like to ask questions, pose questions to the panel members? If not, thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to please invite the following individuals, and if by any chance you're here to express your position physically by attending the public hearing, then please signify, and if you would rather wish not to provide testimony, oral testimony, then please signify as such. Ms. Annie Santos, Michael Denton, Josephine Redmond, Anthony Quintaniza, Rosita Chapin, Rita Okiyama, David Hernandez, David Sablan, Dolores Camacho, Edward Pangilinan, Arita Martinez, Mary Lou, I apologize. Mary Lou Martinez, Ernestina Perez, Louis Gumbar, just show your support. Mr. Vince Bamba, Senator Bob Klitsky, I have an M. Quintaniza, Annabelle Cruz, Gregory Paris. Okay, Mr. Sablan, if you can begin your presentation.
Mr. Chairman and honorable senators, thank you very much for this opportunity to appear before you and the committee today in support of Bill number 326-33. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is David Sablan, and I am the new president of the Concerned Catholics of Guam organization.
I'm here officially representing our organization in that capacity. We thank the sponsor of this bill, Senator Frank Blas Jr., for having compassion and concern for justice. That's what we're all talking about here today. This bill, when signed into law, will allow at least the civil statute of limitations to be lifted so survivors of child sex abuse can come forward and seek restitution and closure to their painful ordeal suffered years ago at the hands of abusive adults who, unfortunately for the survivors, have escaped criminal prosecution for their crimes because of a similar time bar for criminal child sex abuse cases. There is a time void currently between the deadline when civil claims must be filed against these perpetrators and when these children who have been sexually abused actually find the courage to bring their horrid experiences at the hands of their abusers before the courts of Guam. Section 1 of the bill, Legislative Findings and Intent, states that children who are abused often are disabled from the time they suffer the abuse and for many years afterwards. And we saw it earlier today with some of these victims. They are helpless to do anything about the abuse for years afterwards and well beyond the current statute of limitations to file civil claims against their abusers. As a result, these perpetrators continue to prey on innocent children because they know their victims will not say anything to anyone because of the shame attached. It doesn't bother the perpetrator because they have power over their victims. Only when these victims are adults are they able to be more open to discuss their painful experiences with others willing to help them deal with these terrible memories, to help them deal with the attacks on their character and motives, and to help the survivors seek justice and restitution from all involved in perpetrating the abuse and the burying of the criminal acts for their selfish concerns without any regard whatsoever for the welfare of the victims of abuse. This bill gives the survivors of child sexual abuse an opportunity not only to seek justice for these heinous criminal acts that have scarred them forever, but the bill allows them also to file claims against institutions and organizations and other individuals who have engaged in a conspiracy to cover up these crimes. It is with sadness that we have had to read news accounts involving the Archbishop of this Archdiocese of Aguon being accused of alleged child sexual abuse of young altar boys when he was pastor of the Mount Carmel Parish in Aguon in the 1970s. The abuse survivors can only just now come forth and talk about the horrid acts of abuse performed on them when they were innocent children and young teenagers, just when the world is being opened to them. Instead, the Archbishop allegedly led these innocent and trusting young boys down a dark path of living hell, destroying their trust in people who should be nurturing their growth. Teaching them respect and the virtues of being a good person. Now that they are able to talk about this terrible experience and bring their abusers and others involved in the cover-up to pay for these heinous acts, there is really nothing they could do at this late stage because of the statute of limitations for civil claims involving child sex abuse crimes. Where is the justice in this, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee? This bill will give these survivors a chance to have their day in court and prevent the alleged perpetrator from using the statute of limitations as an affirmative defense against the survivors. The attorneys of the survivors also have the opportunity to bring such cases before the court with a wide degree of latitude. With the repeal of Section 11306.1 of Article 3, Chapter 11, Title 7 of the Guam Code Annotated, as proposed by this bill. Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, please do not allow such perverted acts by these child sex abusers to go unpunished, because the victims were children who were traumatized into years of silence because of the severe shame they felt at the time of the abuse. The passage of this bill and its enactment into law will be justice served, albeit years later. Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, please do not allow such perverted acts by these child sex abusers to go unpunished, because the victims were children who were traumatized into years of silence because of the severe shame they felt at the time of the abuse. I have children, so I'm thinking of all of this. I'm sorry. The passage of this bill and its enactment into law will be justice served, albeit years later. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, please act swiftly in passing this bill so the governor can sign it into law quickly. Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee on this important piece of legislation. David Sablan, your president of CCOG.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sablan, for your testimony this morning.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Blas and Senators, thank you for enabling this opportunity for us to present our testimonies in support of this bill. My name is Mary Lou Diaz Martinez. I too support in full Bill 326-33 to lift the statute of limitation in child abuse cases. We all know that as two or more individuals who experience or observe the same occurrence or event, be it positive or negative, the impact, the experience, or the emotions would differ simply because every individual is unique with regard to the manner in which these things would be internalized. A traumatic physical encounter such as a sexual abuse experienced in childhood, no doubt we could surmise, would not only be impacted mentally and psychologically, but the level and depth of such trauma would be different for every child. And the average adult need not have a college degree in psychology or sociology to be cognizant of such a fact. Couldn't we then also surmise that the length of time it may require for the individual victim to get over, to heal, to find closure from such trauma, enough to be able to move forward or move on in their lives and live a productive and normal life, such as those they observe with their friends, the classmates, or their siblings, even as they journey through adulthood? That length of time will differ naturally for each one of them. How can we then be so presumptuous as to put a time frame or an expiration date on the process for a child who may now even be an adult to get over and heal from sexual and mental abuse, especially from an adult perpetrator who enjoyed the privilege of the child's or his parents' trust and admiration? In seeking justice for such trauma as sexual abuse in childhood, if seeking justice for such trauma as sexual abuse in childhood has a limited time frame, such a letdown could even cause a bad taste in the mouth, so to speak, with regard to the child or the parents or even the public's perception of a specific profession, religion, or community from which that perpetrator may come from or may have been a part of. It's a human reaction after all. You know, I deviate from my written, but I'm a cradle Catholic. My father was a deacon, and I practically went through a Catholic education from kindergarten here in Tahi all the way to my first 2 years of college. And so I have that admiration and respect for the clergy. I continue, and the religious order. And for this bill to be passed, it will enable individuals to seek justice against individuals and not the community or the religious entity. And, you know, for many of the adults who this would benefit, would be my age. Since I grew up in a religious educational environment, I know a few who have been abused. For a few of them, their perpetrators have already passed away because of the time span that it took for them to seek justice. And so for the sake of friends, family, and adults our age, for the sake of children and their future, not only ours but also for Guam, who fall into such traumatic abuse, I ask that you consider voting for the passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martinez, for your testimony this morning. Ms. Cruz.
Buenos Zenhafede. My name is Annabelle Cruz, and I come before the 33rd Guam Legislature today to express my support for Bill 326. I am a social worker by profession whose life work has been dedicated to promoting the interests and welfare of the children of Guam. I've spent the majority of my professional life in a variety of capacities in this arena, including several years as the administrator of the Bureau of Social Services Administration, which one of the programs under that bureau is the Child Protective Services. In other words, the investigation of child sexual abuse and neglect. In that regard, and in light of recent events regarding altar boys coming forth after long periods of silence to tell their stories of sexual abuse, I felt compelled to share my thoughts with you and to come and support this bill. First, I would like to address some of the important factors or features surrounding child sexual abuse. They are as follows. Child abuse has immediate and devastating effects on the child victim. These effects have lasting, if not permanent, implications, most often permanent. Child victims are specifically targeted, chosen by their respective predators, and groomed prior to the actual abuse. They feel powerless, helpless, ashamed, fearful, among many other responses. Most child victims, especially male child victims, won't tell. The majority of male victims will not tell. In fact, they would go to their grave having never opened their mouth because of the implications of disclosure. If and when they do tell, the typical consequences are the incident is minimized, if not outright dismissed. The child victim is punished. The child victim is blamed and victimized all over again by negative responses. Child victims are robbed of their innocence. They suffer quietly in silence. They are made to believe that they were willing participants. They feel they have no recourse. They are made to understand very clearly that the power and the authority of the offender is very solid. Most child victims are violated by adults who are known to them, family, relatives, immediate family, relatives, friends of family, family friends rather, neighbors, and others who have reason to be in close proximity to the child. For example, just to mention a few, school, sports, arts, childcare, religious scenarios, camps, and so on and so forth. Second, now I'd like to move to address some of the key features of child sexual abusers, molesters. They are as follows. They are predators. Be clear about that. they are predators. They conscientiously choose their victims. They establish relationships with the child and their families. They gravitate towards professions and other opportunities, activities that give them access to groups of children that match their particular preferences. And there are preferences in child sexual abuse. There's heavy file, there's petty files, there's males and females, and some are non-discriminatory. They establish legitimate power and authority not only with respect to the child, but with their parents and caregivers as well. Most will take their time to groom the child to include incremental acts of sexualizing the child. Most will end up assaulting multiple victims, multiple children. While some may actually molest or rape, the majority will take the time necessary to ensure their victims will never report the crime and that their parents and guardians will never find out. You have an example of that today in the testimonies of our victims that have come forth before you. Lastly, Senators, I'd like to stress the fact that everyone has a role in the prevention of child sexual abuse and molestation. It does not rest solely on the professionals. It does not rest solely on the shoulders of investigators, police officers, therapists, mandated reporters, and the judicial system. Senators, I want to point out the fact that we, those engaged with this topic professionally, are all involved after the fact, after the child has been molested. I pause for a minute to let that sink in because that's really critical. Policymakers, educators, humanitarian organizations, religious groups, and others must partner up with us so that we can effectively address and help prevent the victimization of our most vulnerable citizens, our precious children. Senators, I urge you to do your part by passing Bill 326. Sizus Maasi.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cruz, for your testimony this morning. Ms. Paris?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. My name is Gregory D. Paris. I'm a resident of Tamuning, and I'm here to support Bill number 326-33 to lift the statute of limitations. We must stop the cycle of violence against children by child sexual abuse. You have the power to do that. We must stop the vicious cycle of withholding information, not reporting abuse because of social or cultural mores. You have the power to do that. We must stop the cycle of allowing predators to run free, emboldened and empowered and believing in themselves that they can continue to rape children. You have the power to do that. Please, Senators, act on this bill as quickly as possible and stop these predators, protect our children, and protect the future of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paris, and to everyone on the panel, thank you for your testimony this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, as chair and colleagues, I hope that to not only have your endorsement, but I will suspend any additional receipt of oral testimony this morning and call for a continuance of this hearing for Monday morning at 10 a.m. So to everyone who has provided testimony, certainly appreciated. That's going to be a continuation of today's public hearing. Once again, the committee is going to continue this public hearing of Bill number 326 as 33, Monday morning, August 1st at 10 a.m. And then the committee will close receipt of any written testimony through August 3rd, the close of business Wednesday next week, August 3rd, so that it would allow the committee to be able to compile the report and ensure that the legislation is presented before the legislative body prior to the next legislative session, which is scheduled sometime in August. So I thank you, everyone, for your presence today. And like I was shared a little earlier, once again, just for the record, this public hearing will continue 10 a.m. Monday, August 1st on Bill 326. Thank you again.